Jeremy Corbyn is England's hard-left ex-Labour leader, and he's still a totemic figure in British politics. Now, Corbyn clearly wants to be seen as a friend to Islam, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. But the first thing any true friend of Islam should do is to denounce the people who are giving that religion a bad name. You don't pander to them, apologise for them, offer justifications for them, or excuse their abominable behaviour in any way. Especially not if you've been a prospective Prime Minister. This much should be entirely obvious. Yet to Corbyn, it isn't. He even refused to condemn Islamic terrorism when there was an attack during the election campaign of 2019. But he moved with indecent haste to condemn Britain's role in allegedly provoking it. And he also said he would continue to release Islamic terrorists from prison early, refusing to withdraw his remarks, even when a similar attack happened again just days later. Much of Corbyn's motivation revolves around the issue of Israel, and when he calls Hamas and Hezbollah his friends and brothers, or beseeches us to look for the good points of ISIS, he's frequently defended on the grounds that he's attempting to foster peace. But this is patent nonsense. Corbyn is an opposition MP in Britain. He's in no position at all to influence peace in the Middle East, and he's never once been involved in discussions in Palestine. But far more crucially, anyone genuinely advocating for peace has to make the same overtures to both sides. But when has he ever spoken up for Israel? When has Corbyn ever urged us to look for their good points? When has he called Israelis his friends? All Corbyn has ever done is to kiss the backside of Islamic terror while pouring scorn on Israel. That approach fosters conflict, not peace. And that's all that Corbyn does. More than that, when you have groups that vocally advocate genocide, as Hamas, Hezbollah and ISIS all do, then the only valid approach is to denounce that. Mealy-mouthed platitudes which cast these genocidal lunatics as your brothers are unacceptable, because that's how genocide happens. And all those who apologise for or defend Corbyn for this approach are equally culpable. It might also be pointed out that the only true democracy in the region, the only state with tolerance for freedom of religion, respect for the rights of women, gays and the trans community, is Israel. There are 3 million Palestinian Arabs in Israel who all enjoy full rights and the protection of the law. But there's not one Israeli Jew in Palestine. And if there was, they would almost certainly be lynched. One might have hoped that the last 20 years had shown that, in siding with fundamental Islam against democratic Israel, the left has picked the wrong side. But they'd rather continue to make mistakes than ever admit they're wrong. And regardless, that's an issue for another day and another film. But back to Corbyn. This is a man who's pandered to the worst Islamic fanatics for years, while continually disparaging the West and Israel. He courts our enemies while pouring scorn on our allies and on the nation that has sheltered him, cared for him, and given him the liberty to spout his noxious views. This is a man who called the death of Osama bin Laden a tragedy, who's been seen happily giving the salute of the vile Muslim Brotherhood, and who took part in an elaborate ceremony where he laid a wreath on the tomb of the leaders of Black September, the terrorist group which murdered 11 Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics in 1972, as well as many other atrocities. He's appeared at numerous events with extremely radical figures, virtually bending the knee to them in front of their fluttering flags of Hamas and Hezbollah. Corbyn compared Marwan Barghouti, a convicted terrorist accused of plotting a series of suicide bombings in Israel, to Nelson Mandela, and he called him an iconic figure for ordinary Palestinians. He also called Raed Salah an honoured citizen, despite the fact that notorious hate preacher and anti-Semite has called Jews monkeys and bacteria. Corbyn claimed that Ibrahim Hewitt, a Palestinian activist who had penned a widely distributed pamphlet crammed with rampant homophobia, recommendations on the servile status of women, and demands that adulterers and apostates be stoned to death, was someone he had grown to know extremely well, and I consider him to be a very good friend. He also greeted Azam Tamimi, who called suicide bombing a noble cause that he would willingly take part in for God, and he described the speeches of Hassan Badru, Khalid Mashal, and Abdulaziz Umar, all senior figures in Hamas, as electrifying. Corbyn liaised with Layla Khaled, who had blown up and hijacked a number of planes, and he described the terrorist who had killed 600 Israelis, many of them children, as his brothers after they were released in a prisoner exchange. Corbyn even questioned whether there was a serious case against them. Just a month before becoming party leader, it emerged that he had accepted £2,000 from Ibrahim Hamami, a Hamas sympathiser who applauded the stabbing of Jews, and he welcomed Diab Abu Jarjar to a Stop the War meeting attended by the Hezbollah MP Hussein El Haj. The Belgian activist had talked of his hatred of homosexuals, joy at 9/11, and had described the death of every American, British or Dutch soldier as a victory. Jarjar, who claimed that Europe has made the cult of the Holocaust and Jew worship in its alternative religion, recalled meeting the Labour leader on numerous occasions and spoke warmly of him as a political friend. Corbyn had even campaigned for the release of Jawad Botmer and Samar Alami, the men convicted of bombing London's Israeli embassy in 1994. This is Jeremy Corbyn, the man of peace, who's not even a little bit anti-Semitic. It even emerged that Corbyn had spent years as a paid shill of Iranian television. He'd even continued taking their money and spouting propaganda after Ofcom had withdrawn Press TV's licence for torturing an interviewee. Corbyn was seen speaking on the channel after a number of Egyptian soldiers had been killed in a terror attack. Even the authorities in Cairo admitted the atrocity had been carried out by jihadis, but Corbyn slithered into his seat to point the finger elsewhere. He insinuated that, "I suspect the hand of Israel in this whole process." Corbyn allowed support for radical Islam and anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic sentiments to bubble through the party at an alarming rate, an issue he palpably failed to deal with, despite 5 years as party leader. Yet while he was notably soft on any vitriol directed at the Jews, any critics of fundamental Islam, like Sarah Champion and Trevor Phillips, were dealt with firmly and rapidly. That's a topic for another video. Corbyn showed his colours in the way he responded to that crisis. He snubbed an invitation to dinner with Benjamin Netanyahu before immediately accepting an offer from MEND, Muslim Engagement and Development. The director of that organisation was Azad Ali, a man who has frequently spoken of his distaste for democracy and a desire to see Sharia implemented in the UK. Ali also admitted his love for Anwar al-Awlaki, an al-Qaeda recruiter who was one of his favourite speakers. Awlaki also defended Hamas, while approving of clerics who called for the murder of British soldiers. Ali also praised Abdullah Yusuf Azam, Osama bin Laden's mentor, and he believed that Muslims were obliged to kill British soldiers in Iraq. Ali has also publicly praised Hamas and Hezbollah. 2 other Labour ministers, Harriet Harman and Ed Miliband, had appeared with Ali when he made those comments. Emily Thornberry also attended a speech by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas that claimed the Jews deserved the centuries of persecution they faced, including the Holocaust, because of their social role related to usury and banks. But Thornberry wrote a gushing report of the event. Corbyn promptly celebrated the end of Ramadan in June 2018 with Fadi El-Atani, who has frequently compared Zionists to Nazis and who accused Israel of being guilty of their own Holocaust. In September, Momentum, the organisation pledged to support Corbyn's leadership, invited the British anti-Israeli activist Ua Jazovic to speak at an event attached to the Labour Party conference. Yet not only was she an artist outspoken in her views, she had actually defaced the memorial of the Warsaw Ghetto by scrawling Free Gaza and Palestine across it. Ash Sarkar even spoke up to defend that desecration. Jazovic at least had the decency to apologise later. Sarkar never did. It also emerged that when Corbyn prayed at the graves of Salah Khalif, Fakra al-Amari, Hayel Abdullah Hamid and Atef Bazizo, the leaders of Black September who had been assassinated by Mossad in the early 90s, he was joined by Fatima Banawi, who had planted a bomb at an Israeli cinema, and Maher al-Taher, the leader of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who went on to murder a British rabbi a month later. Shul Ladny, a Holocaust survivor who represented Israel as a speedwalker at the 1972 Olympics, and who escaped that massacre too, was filled with anger and revulsion by Corbyn's actions. But Hamas had a rather different response. They issued a statement which declared they salute Jeremy Corbyn's supportive position to the Palestinians. Corbyn and Diane Abbott promptly began arguing in favour of support for Shamima Begum, a member of ISIS who defended the bombing of Ariana Grande's concert in Manchester as a justifiable retaliation, and who claimed to feel nothing when seeing piles of decapitated heads of the kuffar. Fabian Hamilton, another Labour frontbencher, arranged a Westminster meeting with Yahya al-Saud, a Jordanian MP who has praised Palestinian terrorism and who described Israel as a Jewish tumour. On the day before the 2019 general election, a noisy contingent of Corbynites taunted a group protesting about anti-Semitism. They jeered from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The words of Hamas, a clarion call to eradicate the state of Israel and to exterminate its people. Some of Corbyn's allies, like George Galloway and Ken Livingstone, are notorious in this regard too. Livingstone had invited Yusuf al-Qaradi to City Hall, warmly embraced him and described him as a leading progressive voice within Islam. Yet the man he praised has openly supported terrorism against Israel, the murder of gays, and violence against women. When the journalist Andrew Anthony pointed this out, Livingstone dismissed it as Zionist propaganda. But the journalist had plucked the evidence directly from Qaradi's own website. Galloway was a particular admirer of Saddam Hussein, that brutal dictator who gassed the Kurds, tortured and murdered thousands, gunned down half the Iraqi parliament on his first day in office, and waged brutal wars against Iran and Kuwait. Visiting him in 1994, when his crimes were known and undeniable, Galloway genuflected in front of Saddam and gushed, "Sir, I salute your courage, your strength, and your indefatigability, and I want you to know that we are with you until victory, until Jerusalem." It just had to end with a dig at the Jews, didn't it? But then Galloway had also befriended Uday Hussein, a serial rapist who enjoyed torturing footballers, as well as Tariq Aziz, who shot prisoners and condoned using poison gas on the Kurds. These then are the sort of people Corbyn associates with. He regards himself as a man of peace, as do his many admirers, but he isn't. He's just on the wrong side, for he continually defends the most brutal and intolerant killers on earth. Just as they did in the 20th century when they defended the Stalinist and Maoist regimes while turning against the democratic West, the left have sided with darkness. They are on the wrong side of history once more. If you want to support this channel, please like, subscribe, and think about buying my books. They're called The Tyranny of the Left and they go into topics like this in much greater detail. They're available on the links below. Please do feel free to pick them up and let me know what you think. Thank you.